The cafeteria on Outpost Meridian smelled like recycled air and burnt protein bread, and on most days, nobody paid attention to anybody else. That was the unspoken rule of the frontier: keep your head down, eat your ration, move on. But the day Caleb noticed the small purple girl sitting alone at the far end of the long metal table, something in his chest cracked open like a fault line shifting deep beneath the surface. She wasn't crying. That was what broke him. She looked like she had forgotten how. If you believe in kindness and second chances, you're in the right place. Like this video, drop a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear this today, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, because stories like this one are exactly why this channel exists. Caleb Marin was not a remarkable man by any standard the galaxy used to measure such things. He was 34 years old, a mid-level maintenance engineer on a Joint Species Federation outpost perched at the edge of charted space. He had no medals, no commanding rank, no family waiting for him back on Earth. What he did have was a tray of food, 2 sandwiches, a cup of synthetic broth, and a small square of something that the menu board optimistically called honey cake. He had been saving the second sandwich for the long shift ahead. He stood in the middle of that crowded, noisy cafeteria full of soldiers and dockworkers and diplomats and creatures of a dozen different worlds, and he looked at that small girl sitting completely alone, her lavender hands wrapped around a cup of water that had gone cold, her golden eyes fixed on nothing. He walked over and sat across from her without asking permission, because somehow he knew that if he asked, she would say no. She was small, even for her species, a Velhari, he guessed, judging by the pointed ears, the violet skin, the soft bioluminescent shimmer at the edges of her hair that pulsed faintly when she breathed. She wore a plain gray tunic with no markings, no insignia, nothing to tell the world who she was. She looked up at him with those ancient, golden eyes, and Caleb felt something he could not name, as if he were being measured not by his rank or his record, but by something far older and far more honest. He didn't say anything grand. He simply slid the second sandwich across the tray toward her. That was all. A sandwich. The most ordinary gesture in any world. She stared at it for a long moment, and then she looked at him, and he saw it, the flicker of something behind the stillness. Not gratitude, not yet. Something more fragile than that. Recognition, maybe. The quiet shock of being seen by someone who expected nothing back. She reached out slowly and took the sandwich, and Caleb picked up his broth and pretended to read the maintenance schedule on his wrist screen, because he understood instinctively that she needed him to make this feel normal. So he made it feel normal. Her name, he would learn over the following weeks, was Saya. She never offered a last name, and he never asked. She appeared in the cafeteria at the same hour every third day, always alone, always at the far end of the table, always with only water on her tray. Caleb began timing his lunch breaks to match hers. He told himself it was coincidence, and then he stopped lying to himself and simply admitted that the best part of his week had become sitting across from a small alien girl who barely spoke and ate her food with the careful precision of someone who had once been taught that every bite was a privilege. They built their friendship in the spaces between words. He would bring 2 portions and she would accept one without ceremony. Sometimes she drew small shapes on the condensation of her cup, spirals and star patterns that he didn't recognize but that felt important in the way that ancient things always feel important even before you understand them. Sometimes she watched the other beings in the cafeteria with an expression that was equal parts curiosity and sadness, as if she were cataloging the universe and finding it both beautiful and unbearably temporary. Once, after a particularly brutal shift in which Caleb had made a costly repair error that nearly cost the outpost a critical power relay, he sat down across from her looking like a man who had swallowed a stone. She looked at him for a moment, then quietly pushed the honey cake portion of her tray across to him. He laughed, a raw, surprised sound, and she almost smiled, and that almost smile was worth every hard thing the day had handed him. He never knew, during any of those quiet shared lunches, that 3 Federation intelligence officers stationed on the outpost had filed separate reports about the girl. He never knew that her personal security detail, 6 of the most elite operatives in the known galaxy, were present in that cafeteria every single time, disguised as dock workers and communications staff, watching from a careful distance with their hands never far from their weapons. He never knew that the gray tunic she wore was woven with material that could withstand a direct plasma strike, or that the simple gold pendant at her throat was a distress beacon that would summon an armada within minutes of activation. He never knew that Saya was the only granddaughter of Empress Velhari Orin, ruler of the Velhari sovereignty, a civilization spanning 43 systems, the oldest continuous government in the known galaxy, a woman whose word could reorder trade routes and whose silence could end wars. Saya had been sent to the outpost under deep cover as part of her education, her grandmother's insistence that the future empress learn the galaxy not from thrones and briefings, but from its edges, its forgotten corners, its ordinary days. What he never knew was that Saya had spent 6 weeks on that outpost before he sat down across from her. 6 weeks of nobody meeting her eyes, nobody making space, nobody offering anything that wasn't required by protocol or duty. 6 weeks of being invisible in a room full of people, because loneliness does not discriminate between the powerful and the powerless, it finds everyone eventually, and it is always the same cold weight. And then a man with grease on his uniform and no remarkable qualities whatsoever slid a sandwich across a metal tray, and looked away so she wouldn't feel small for accepting it. 3 months later, Caleb received an official summons, a thing so far outside his ordinary life that he read it 4 times before it became real. He was escorted to the outpost's formal reception chamber, where Saya stood in robes he had never seen, surrounded by people who moved the way important people move. She looked at him with those same golden eyes, and this time she did not almost smile. She smiled completely, and it was the most luminous thing he had ever seen. Beside her stood an elderly woman whose presence filled the room like gravity, Empress Velhari Orin herself, her silver hair swept like a crown, her bearing ancient and absolute. The Empress looked at Caleb for a long moment, the way her granddaughter always looked at people, as if reading something written beneath the surface. Then she said, simply and without ceremony, that her granddaughter had told her about the man who made her feel like a person before he knew she was a princess. She said that the galaxy had too many people who were kind only to power. She said she wanted to meet one who was not. Caleb didn't know what to say. So he said the only true thing he had. He said she had shared more with him than he ever gave her, she had given him back the belief that showing up for someone, quietly and without agenda, was never a small thing. That sometimes the most important moment in a life is a single ordinary lunch, and the choice to slide something across the table to someone sitting alone. If this story moved something in you, if it reminded you that kindness costs nothing and changes everything, please like this video, leave a comment below, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support keeps these stories alive. Before we close, tell us in the comments, have you ever done something small for a stranger that turned out to matter more than you knew? We would love to read your story. The cafeteria on Outpost Meridian still smells like recycled air and burnt protein bread. But somewhere in the memory of that battered metal table, in the echo of 2 people eating in companionable silence at the edge of the known galaxy, there is a truth that no empire needs to decree and no treaty needs to formalize, that the universe bends, ever so slightly, in the direction of those who choose to be kind, not because they know it will matter, but simply because someone is sitting alone, and they have enough to share.